You know, sometimes the biggest truths hit you when you're least expecting them in the most mundane places. For me, it wasn't a dramatic courtroom reveal or a flashing headline. It was in the cereal aisle right between the Lucky Charms and the Frosted Flakes with a toddler clinging to my leg screaming for a toy he couldn't have. That's when I realized for all the scandal, all the public apologies, all the late night talk show circuits, real life with sticky fingers and spilled milk just keeps on going. And those kids, they don't care about your curated image or your carefully worded press releases. They just care if you're there, truly there, when they need you. That's the Baldwins reality check. No matter how much chaos swirls around you, the tiny humans you're responsible for will always anchor you to the gritty, beautiful, undeniable present. And sometimes that's both the biggest burden and the most profound blessing. My world had just imploded seemingly beyond repair, yet here I was negotiating with a 2-year-old over a box of sugary cereal. It was absurd, it was humbling, it was everything. And that's where my story truly begins. Before the cereal aisle revelation, before the whispers turned into shouts and the headlines burned brighter than any sun, there was a different kind of reality. One bathed in the warm golden glow of what I genuinely believed was a perfect life. I was young, idealistic, and completely swept off my feet by Liam. He wasn't just handsome, he was magnetic. His laugh could fill a room, his eyes held a twinkle that promised adventure, and he spoke with an eloquence that made every conversation feel like a profound discovery. We met at a charity gala. A cliche, I know, but it felt like destiny. He was working for a nonprofit, passionately advocating for environmental conservation, and I, fresh out of college, was looking for a purpose, something bigger than myself. He made me believe we could change the world one small act at a time. Our early days were a whirlwind of passionate debates over coffee, impromptu road trips to hidden beaches and late-night calls that stretched into dawn. He'd bring me wildflowers, he'd picked himself cook elaborate dinners from scratch, even though he once burned water, which we still joked about, and listened to my dreams with an intensity that made me feel truly seen. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my confidant, my muse, my anchor. He often spoke about his family, the Baldwins, a prominent name in philanthropy and real estate. He painted a picture of a close-knit philanthropic dynasty dedicated to giving back. I admired that deeply. I believed in his integrity, his passion, his unwavering moral compass. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner and more. When he proposed under a sky full of shooting stars, I didn't hesitate. It wasn't just love, it was a profound sense of rightness. Our wedding was a fairy tale, a grand affair at their sprawling estate filled with laughter, tears, and promises of forever. Soon after our first child, Lily arrived, a tiny bundle of pure joy, followed by our son Noah 2 years later. Our home, a beautiful, sprawling house in the suburbs of Connecticut, was always filled with the scent of freshly baked cookies, the sounds of children's laughter, and the gentle hum of a life well lived. We hosted family gatherings, celebrated every holiday with gusto, and volunteered at local shelters. We were the picture-perfect American family, or so I thought. Every morning, Liam would leave for work impeccably dressed with a kiss and a promise to be home for dinner. He was a dedicated father, always making time for bedtime stories, soccer games, and school plays despite his demanding schedule. He'd often say, "Family is everything, Maya. It's our legacy, our purpose." And I believed him with every fiber of my being. Looking back, those were the blissful, ignorant days, the calm before the storm, the prelude to a symphony of deceit. It's funny how quickly your perception of reality can shatter, leaving you scrambling to pick up the pieces of a life you thought you knew. I often wonder if I could go back, would I see the cracks then, the subtle shifts, the tiny inconsistencies, or was I just too blinded by love, too eager to believe in the perfect narrative he spun? Do you ever find yourself looking back at a moment and realizing, oh, that's when it started? It's chilling, isn't it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The cracks, when they finally appeared, were subtle at first, like hairline fractures in a seemingly flawless pane of glass. It started small. Liam, always so meticulous about his schedule, began staying out later, often with vague excuses about client dinners or unexpected meetings. His phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, became a sacred object, always with him face down. I told myself it was stress, the demands of his high-pressure job. He was, after all, building a philanthropic empire, making the world a better place. Right. Then came the little things. The unusual charges on our joint credit card, large sums spent at a luxury boutique in a part of town I'd never heard him mention. a new expensive watch that mysteriously appeared on his wrist, which he dismissed as a gift from a grateful donor. My gut, a quiet voice I'd always trusted, began to stir a low hum of unease. I tried to push it down to rationalize to trust. After all, this was Liam, my devoted husband, the man who'd promised me forever, the man who tucked our children into bed every night. But the hum grew louder, evolving into a persistent buzz. One evening, while he was in the shower, his phone for once lay abandoned on his nightstand screen up. A notification flashed, a text message from an unknown number. My heart hammered. I knew I shouldn't look, but my hand, almost of its own accord, reached for it. The message was short, cryptic. Can't wait for our trip next month. Missing you already, my love. My breath hitched. My love. It wasn't from a colleague, certainly not a family member. A cold dread seeped into my bones. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sensation of the world tilting on its axis. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the phone. I knew his passcode, he'd never changed it. And then the deluge, an entire hidden folder buried deep within his photo gallery, filled with pictures of him with another woman. Not just casual photos, but intimate, tender moments. Holding hands, laughing, even kissing. There were photos of them on exotic beaches, at fancy restaurants, in front of famous landmarks. The dates on the photos stretched back years long before our kids were born, even before our wedding. My world didn't just tilt, it shattered. The woman was beautiful, vibrant, with a bright, infectious smile. Her name, I later discovered from the message threads, was Chloe. She wasn't just a one-time fling. This was a parallel life meticulously constructed, meticulously hidden. He hadn't just cheated, he had lived a double life. The charity work trips, the late-night meetings, the grateful donor gifts, they were all elaborate lies, a cruel facade built on a foundation of deceit. The emotional impact was like a physical blow. My stomach churned, my head throbbed, and a suffocating wave of betrayal washed over me. The man I loved, the father of my children, the pillar of my life, was a stranger. A master manipulator. Every "I love you," every tender kiss, every promise now felt like a sick joke. I collapsed onto the floor, the phone still clutched in my hand, tears streaming down my face. Not just tears of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated rage. How could he? How could I have been so blind? My entire perception of our life, of our family, was a lie. The beautiful house, the perfect family photos, the legacy he so proudly spoke of. It was all tainted, hollowed out by his secret. It wasn't just my heart that was broken, it was my entire reality. Have you ever felt that gut-wrenching moment of discovery where everything you thought you knew flips upside down? Tell me your experience. I'm here to listen. The moment Liam walked out of the bathroom, humming a tune, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in our home, I knew I couldn't hold it in. The calm I'd somehow mustered after the initial shock evaporated, replaced by a volcanic eruption of fury and hurt. He paused, seeing me on the floor, the phone still in my hand, screen up, displaying the damning evidence. His hum died, his face, usually so composed, contorted with a mixture of confusion, then recognition, and finally a flicker of pure panic. "Maya, what? What's wrong?" he stammered, his voice losing its usual smooth cadence. I slowly rose, my body trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer force of my anger. "What's wrong?" My voice was a low, dangerous whisper, barely recognizable even to myself. "You want to know what's wrong, Liam?" I held up the phone, shaking, so he could see the images of him and Chloe staring back at us, mocking our perfect life. This is what's wrong." His eyes widened, darting between the phone and my face. "Maya, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like." "Don't you dare," I spat, cutting him off. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence with another one of your pathetic lies. I've seen everything, Liam. Every text, every photo. How long have you been living this pathetic double life?" He took a step back, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. "Maya, listen. It's complicated. She was just a distraction. It meant nothing. You and the kids, you're my family, my real family." The words felt like acid on an open wound. A distraction, years of a distraction, exotic trips, secret rendezvous, my love texts. And what about the charity, Liam? The foundation. Was that a distraction too? Or was that just a convenient cover for your sick little game? My voice cracked, tears finally breaking through the barrier of my rage. "You lied to me. You lied to our children. You made a mockery of everything we built. I never meant to hurt you, Maya. He pleaded, his voice thick with what I now recognized as false remorse. I was under so much pressure. The business, the family expectations. I made a mistake. A mistake! I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. This wasn't a mistake, Liam. This was a deliberate, calculated betrayal. Every single day you looked me in the eye, you kissed our children goodnight knowing you were living a lie. What kind of man does that? He tried to approach me, but I recoiled as if burned. Don't touch me, just don't. I can't even look at you right now. My mind raced a whirlwind of emotions. Forgive him. How could I leave him? What about the kids? The life we'd built? But how could I stay with a man who had shattered my trust into a million pieces? Suddenly, Lily, our 5-year-old, wandered into the hallway, woken by our raised voices. She rubbed her sleepy eyes. Mommy, Daddy, what's going on? The sight of her innocent face was a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about them, about protecting them from the wreckage he'd created. I looked at Liam, then back at Lily. My decision crystallized in that agonizing moment. There was no going back. There was no repairing this. Not now. Not ever. Get out, Liam! I said, my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside me. Pack a bag. Don't say another word. Just go. His face drained of color. Maya, no, please. Think about the kids. I'm thinking about the kids, I said, my gaze unwavering, meeting his. And they deserve a mother who isn't living a lie, and a father who isn't whatever you are. Get out. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the shattering of a decade of trust. He knew I meant it. His shoulders slumped, and he slowly, silently turned and walked away. The sound of his footsteps ascending the stairs, then the rustle of clothes, the click of a suitcase closing. Each sound was a nail in the coffin of our shared life. The silence after he left was deafening, yet strangely almost liberating. It was over. The lie was exposed. And now the hardest part, figuring out how to rebuild, how to explain, and most importantly, how to heal. What would you have done in my shoes? Confronted him immediately or waited? Let me know your thoughts. The days, weeks, and months that followed Liam's departure were a blur of raw emotion and logistical nightmares. There were hushed conversations with lawyers, tearful explanations to bewildered family members, and the unbearable agony of telling Lily and Noah that Daddy wouldn't be living with us anymore. How do you explain betrayal to a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old? You don't. You soften the blow, you reassure them of your unwavering love, and you hold them tight as their little worlds wobble. It was a constant battle against the urge to collapse, to give in to the grief and anger. But looking at their innocent faces, I knew I had to be strong. For them. The grand house, once filled with laughter, felt cavernous and empty without Liam's presence. Yet strangely, it also felt cleaner, less tainted. I started therapy, a lifeline I clung to, slowly unpicking the layers of deception and my own buried insecurities. It wasn't easy. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days. The resentment choked me. Days I questioned every decision I had ever made. But gradually, painstakingly, the fog began to lift. I realized something profound during that time. True strength isn't about avoiding pain. It's about walking through it piece by agonizing piece. It's about acknowledging the wound, allowing it to bleed, and then slowly, meticulously stitching it back together. I also learned that healing isn't linear. Some days I'd feel like I'd turned a corner only to be ambushed by a sudden memory, a familiar scent, and be thrown back into the despair. But each time I found my way back. My focus shifted entirely to my children. We started new traditions, found joy in simple things. Baking cookies, reading stories, building blanket forts in the living room. I taught them resilience, not by telling them, but by showing them. By continuing to laugh, to love, to live despite the pain. I wanted them to know that while bad things happen, true love endures. And that their worth was not defined by their father's actions, but by their own beautiful, kind hearts. Liam eventually came back a few months later, seeking reconciliation, full of empty promises and performative remorse. He even tried to use the Baldwin name to pressure me. But the woman who stood before him was not the same naive girl he had married. The scales had fallen from my eyes. I calmly, firmly, and unequivocally told him no. There was no going back. The trust was irreparably broken. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, deeply free. My message to anyone out there navigating betrayal, especially when children are involved, is this. Your instinct to protect your children is powerful. Trust it. And remember, putting yourself first, healing yourself, isn't selfish. It's the most selfless thing you can do for them. Because a whole healed parent is far better than a broken one trying to hold together a shattered illusion. The betrayal might have defined a chapter of my life, but it doesn't define my whole story. It became the painful, necessary catalyst for me to rediscover my own strength, to redefine happiness on my own terms, and to build a life for my children rooted in truth, not lies. The Baldwins' reality check was harsh, but it forced me to see the world and myself with crystal clear clarity. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I am forever grateful. If you've walked through a similar fire, what was the most important lesson you learned about self love and healing? Share your wisdom below. Your story matters.